Dr. Cornel West, he is a supporter of Bernie Sanders. He had some comments regarding Joe Biden that he made, and I just want to kind of share that with you guys and see what you guys think, because I think it's very indicative of how a lot of progressives think, and probably I would say how a lot of Democrats think, especially after the performance that Joe Biden had, as we've been talking about on this podcast. So let's just get into it here. It says, Cornel West, I'm not sure Biden can beat Trump. This is an article from the Washington Examiner, and it was written on June 22nd. So it was about almost a week before the debates. So it says, Joe Biden lacks the energy and vision needed to beat President Donald Trump in the 2020 election, according to Harvard University philosopher Cornel West. West, who supports Senator Bernie Sanders' presidential campaign, told the Washington Examiner that Biden is taking the black vote for granted and using his association with former President Barack Obama to avoid speaking honestly and candidly to the needs of black people. At the South Carolina Democratic Convention, West said he does not believe Biden, who is selling himself as being the only candidate who can defeat Trump, can actually get the job done because he's, quote, backward looking, end quote. West would not commit to voting for Biden if he wins the nomination, which is not surprising because that's the approach that a lot of progressives take when it comes to whoever ends up facing the Republican nominee, whichever Democrat ends up becoming the nominee and then facing the Republican. It says, this is also quoting West here, it says, I think the important thing right now, we've got to make sure we've got a candidate who can beat Trump. I think Sanders can definitely beat Trump. I'm not sure Biden can beat Trump, but I do not want to beat Trump. But I do want to beat Trump. It says, quoting him again, it says, Bernie Sanders is the candidate who can beat Trump. Because you've got to beat Trump with energy, enthusiasm, fire your people up. Biden does not have that. It would be a rerun of what we have in 2016 with Sister Hillary, he added. West also called on the 2020 frontrunner to apologize for expressing nostalgia about working with segregationist senators in the 1970s. Biden has said he has nothing to apologize for, amid criticism, and several prominent African-American Democrats have come to his defense. That doesn't mean he's immoral. He's a decent brother, but he's got to learn to be Socratic, which is to question himself and acknowledge he can be wrong. That's not a good sign if he's unwilling to question himself, West said. That's some prophetic words there from Cornel West. You know, he's a guy that has been always very straightforward with what he's saying. He always makes sure that people hear, you know, his honest opinions. He puts it out there for people to hear, and he doesn't cut any corners. You know, he doesn't try and censor himself, let's say, so to speak, in any way. He always tries to speak very candidly and very succinctly and make sure that people, you know what he thinks. And it's really wonderful to see that from progressives. And that's how a lot of progressives are. I'm like that. I know a lot of other people that are, a lot of people that I'm, aligned with, whether it's just on policy, but just on social media. These are people that are all very outspoken, and they make sure that the progressive base and the progressive community is heard, and we put our policies forward. It's always about policy with us. The progressives and the leftists out there, we care about policy. We don't care about identity. Identity always takes a backdoor to majority of progressives out there and leftists who argue political issues. We focus on the policies because ultimately it's the policies that's going to frame, and it's going to frame the debate, and it's also going to mold this country into what we want it to be. And while identity has some sort of role, and progressives do like to argue about obviously issues of racism and sexism and stuff, but that's ultimately, those are important issues as long as they focus on policy. So as long as you're focusing on policies that pertain to sexism, racism, any kind of ism, as long as it narrows down the specific policies and makes sure that the ideas are put forth and make sure those are like the main things that we're going to be debating. So we're going to be debating the overall impact of what those policies is going to lead for the country. Then that's important. Now, when it comes to like I said, when I argued earlier in the podcast, when it comes to the issue of identity politics and kind of just arguing about identity, that's a very narrow-minded approach. It's an approach that's not going to lead to any kind of solutions for the country ultimately. It's going to lead to very short-term results. So going after specific politicians like they have with like Bernie Sanders and stuff, calling him a white man, old white man and stuff. Ultimately, that doesn't mean anything because Bernie Sanders has the right policies. And like Cornel West says here, Bernie Sanders is the person that's going to beat Donald Trump because he's a person that can fire up the base. He's a person that focuses on making sure that the ideas put forth are the ideas that people support, populist ideas, because Bernie is a populist, and making sure that those are going to be the key central tenets of his campaign, and and something that can ultimately make a difference in this country instead of just being like this thing where it's like, okay, well, we support this policy, we support this politician because they are a woman, or we support this politician because they are black, or they're Hispanic, or they're Middle Eastern, or they're gay, or whatever, they're trans, whatever. We support this person because of that. But that's obviously, like I said before, that doesn't have anything to do with the policy, because what are the policies of that person? What are the policies of that person when you really dig deep? So what do they believe, right? So, okay, their identity, okay, wonderful. They're Hispanic, they're gay, they're black, they're Middle Eastern, whatever they are, And we've had all these different kinds of people running, whether they're running for president, whether they're running for the Senate, Congress, whatever, governor. These people have existed, but ultimately it depends what their policies are. And a lot of these politicians, honestly, regardless of their identity, have not had very good policies. And it never mattered. Ultimately, it showed that their identity didn't matter. So that's what I'm saying when I say that the whole focus on identity is a very short-term solution. Because great, you're getting that person with that specific identity in there, with that specific gender or sex or ethnicity, color, whatever it is. You get that person in there, okay, great, wonderful. So we have a gay president, for example. We have a president who's a lesbian, gay, bisexual, whatever. So, okay, are they going to be waging more wars? Are they going to be ending our wars? Are they going to be doing tax cuts for the rich? Are they going to be, cutting entitlement programs? Are they going to be, like Bernie did? Are they going to be doing student debt, debt relief? Are they going to be, getting rid of student debt? Are they going to be pushing for free college? Are they going to be pushing for minimum wage, a higher minimum wage, $15 minimum wage, a living wage? Those are the things that matter. It doesn't matter what their identity is, because it's the policies is the main thing that's going to get us forward in this country. And ultimately, if you don't have the policy, you don't have anywhere to go. You don't have any kind of direction. We don't know what's going to happen to our country if we don't know what policies that our politicians are going to be in favor of, regardless of whether or not they're gay, straight, black, white, Asian, Middle Eastern, whatever. It doesn't matter. And I think that the best examples of that, honestly, are the past. The two, obviously the last Democratic president that we had, Democratic Party president we had, and the last one that almost became the Democratic Party, the president from the Democratic Party, which was Hillary Clinton. Before that, obviously being Barack Obama. Those two politicians are the main example of politicians that have that specific identity that people claim to want, but don't actually push for the policies that people ultimately want. So the policies that people ultimately support. They just like that person's identity. Black man, female, I don't know, relatively, so I mean, if you want to get into some of the policies, relatively decent when it comes to not being racist, relatively decent when it comes to not being, warmongers and, if you want to compare it to, let's say, the Republican Party. Is the Democratic Party just as much as warmongers as the Republicans? Yes, they are. But when it comes to the rhetoric that they use, it's not the same things as, the likes of like George W. Bush, who's going out there and saying, we need to invade Iraq and we need to bomb this, country and we need to go to this country. But when it comes to the actual, that's what I'm saying. That's why the words don't ultimately matter, because Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, they can use all the words they want. All the politicians that are running right now, they can use all the words they want and use all the rhetoric they want and say whatever they want in these debates. But ultimately, if they're not pushing for the policies that we support, as, for example, as Bernie Sanders is, pushing the rhetoric and then pushing for the same policies, if they're not doing that, then they're not doing anything useful. They're just like, they're not even worth even considering for president, let alone being a politician. Get those people out of the way, so we can get actual politicians there, so who can actually create real solutions for our country and move us forward instead of moving us backward, or just kind of remaining, or just kind of keeping us stagnant, in our ways and doing nothing different than we've ever done. And that seems to be what it is, and that seems to be the case with most of our politicians these days. We're remaining stagnant. We're not improving in any way. Just our wars alone and our deficits and, adding onto our debt. I know the issue of, national debt and deficits is more of a conservative thing, but ultimately that is a problem that we're going to have to deal with. And that's an issue that is being pushed by, that is being perpetuated by the Republican Party. As much as they like to talk about deficits and debt and stuff, but the real people that are focusing on saving us from having more debt and deficits are the progressives and people on the left who want to actually save people's lives, and by helping improve their lives in the long run, and making sure that they don't suffer any more than they already are. And if we as a country are suffering, more people are going to be suffering even more than that. If we're suffering as a country right now, people in the future are going to be suffering even more than we are. And that's clearly been the case. Even if you go back 10 years, we're much worse off now than we were 10 years ago. And that's clear based on any metric that you look at.